seen that with the Wi-Fi spectrum. But we're not just talking about delicensing. We're also talking about licenses that are available to not just the mobile companies and not just the big broadcasters, so that you can also, as a small or medium enterprise, get some spectrum to run a local last mile or semi-last mile solution, and increasing access. Can you? Is there a mic for the? Thank you so much.
Thanks. Okay, just to introduce myself, I'm the last mile. I'm the probably guy who uses internet in a village. Having served advertising for 30 years and attending some of these kind of conferences, I thought all of you put together have changed my life in rural India, and I shifted there. I come from Bihar, district Madhubani, where I run a learning center. Since morning I've been hearing about these bandwidths, 2.4, 3.4, 4.4, fiber optic, whatever. The fact is, we do not know how different they are from each other. Okay. Still, to download a 70 MB file, it takes us hours. Mm-hmm. And we keep a couple of dongles, and then we keep trying with the BSNL SIM, Airtel SIM, Vodafone SIM, this SIM, that SIM, and finally we get through, we say how. Yeah. Also, because we run some of the services, right when you are doing a transaction, the signal will go. So I don't know what technology we are talking about since morning. There's a lot of apps which we've been hearing about, which we never asked for. They've been done either because you have it or you don't have it or somebody asked for it. But somewhere the needs are not matching with the delivery system. So when you said Wi-Fi, why can't we first get the basics right and then we can lay optic fiber or whatever fiber we are trying to lay wherever we are trying to lay? My question.
Okay, who on the panel wants to respond to that? Michael, you go.
First of all, I think we're spreading a little all across the spectrum. So I feel at least that we need to focus a little bit in this discussion here. Am I assuming that we're talking about spectrum right now? No, the big topic, I assume we're talking about community networks, but then I heard that we're talking about spectrum, right? And spectrum allocation?
Wireless, yeah.
Okay. So
open spectrum.
Okay, I almost wasted 1 minute. I'll waste 2 seconds and then answer. I don't think this is the main question that we need to be dealing with. But having said that, I want to be a dissenting voice on the issue of spectrum allocation. We need to remember a few things about spectrum allocations. We're talking about wireless spectrum. So wireless is all the way from ultraviolet to what's on the other side of the spectrum. Anything that's radio waves, okay? And we're specifically talking about a particular range of radio waves on which you can transfer data. And right now there are 2 slots that are available, 2.4, 5.8. This talks about 1800 being available indoors. Thanks, Ravina, for updating me on this. And there are talks about adding additional chunks of spectrum as unlicensed. I want to sound 3 points and then I'll transfer the mic to others. The radio waves are a finite resource. There are only so many frequencies available. This is physics. So this is an argument that came in the States where people were discussing. Even if we allocated all the spectrum, we still are not dealing with the need to provide data. It's not going to solve. The solutions will have to come from using existing bandwidth more efficiently. The second thing, the second dissenting question that I have, the ability of the Wi-Fi to be a revolution, the 2.4 and the 5.8, was as much a result of the equipment being very, very cheap as it was of the spectrum being unlicensed. Now it's an egg and hen situation. But if we now delicense, for example, the 700 megahertz range or the 900 megahertz, there is no equipment that is even close in the price to the 2.4 and 5.8. So you're hitting a wall immediately. And the third point, and with that I end my soapbox, is that we really need to think of, if we're talking about rural networks, is this a battle we want to fight? Because the cost of fighting this battle is immense. And the forces we are facing are immense. So, and as someone who does a bit of work in rural areas, there's so much more to be done with what we have available.
Yes, go for it.
Yeah, my name is Mahesh. I work for KGVK, which is based out of Ranchi in Jharkhand. I've been there for around 4 years now. Mikey is one of our valued partners. We work on a project, and we've been struggling quite literally the last 2 years to expand the network out there into the rural communities. I do not know about the policy, the spectrum bandwidth that's allocated and all of that, but I can speak from a demand side of things. Like I said, what we have already, we need to use it wisely, and we need to use it more effectively. And if digital inclusion is our through bandwidth, through mobile phones, whatever it is our ultimate priority, and to provide services or generate new business-related services, which could be an additional income to that neighborhood, or could be access to healthcare, access to education. We need to go for the low-hanging fruits, which are not ultra-rural, which is definitely peri-urban areas, which are still connected, but very fluctuating connections. Quality of connections is low, where the existing operators could do a good job, but they don't have the density for them to get there and do it. And I think these low-hanging fruits should be given out to organizations which are already working and taking long-range Wi-Fi into these areas, generate a solid demand, and then have a cluster-based approach to basically move it further, be it services, be it generating demand on service, business-related activities, similar level of institutional activities, schools, colleges, and other things. So again, like I said, the question could be on spectrum, but I don't know much about it. But what I can tell you is from a demand perspective, that is not being worked more aggressively. And I think delivery, if that is worked, automatically the demand would come for it, and more spectrum can be allocated, can be moved further down. Or,
Can you just perhaps say, what do you think is preventing those types of partnerships from happening?
So I just was analyzing what we did. We started a rural BPO 3 years ago or something. And again, bandwidth was an issue. We were fighting tooth and nail with BSNL. Airtel wouldn't come there. So finally we chanced upon Air Jaldi and we said, let's do this. And they put that network out there all the way in Jharkhand, which is a big this thing. They came all the way and put that network down for us. Then we connected the institution. We run 2 hospitals, a couple of schools. We have some field level offices that we are running. So we started connecting the lower hanging fruits, again, the schools, the institutions, and all that. Then we said, okay, because we are already there, let's generate demand in that neighborhood. Now, again, prices is a big thing. I don't know how that we're going to tackle that. I mean, in terms of BSNL gives you 100 rupees, extremely bad bandwidth, but people want to take it. Or, they just want to have it. I mean, they might not use it. Again, when we go in, our initial costs of putting these things together and generating demand is quite high. And then we have to spec the spectrum along with us, and we have to integrate it into the business, or we have to generate business out of the spectrum for us to sustain and grow. I don't think we have any subsidy. We work a lot in agriculture and dairy, and we do farm mechanization tools with like 1 lakh farmers in the east. There is a subsidy under the Rashtriya Krishi Vikas Yojana. I don't know of any rural broadband related subsidy schemes that are available, so households can just pick that subsidy up and get some spectrum down even before the roads come in. So I think those things would be important.
Okay, my name is Mahabir Pun. I am from Nepal, and I run a small rural ISP called Nepal Wireless. This is ISP that especially working in the remote Himalayan villages and tribal areas to connect those areas, with the internet. Especially we are focusing in education and health. So, we are the last mile people also. So, what I see is here, this morning, in the opening ceremony, Osamaji was telling me that, there are 70% of the people living in the rural areas. The same is true. Like in Nepal, 80% of the people are living in the rural areas. And now the mobile operators are expanding their networks and bringing like 2G, 3G, or 4G, whatever. But it is going to cost. But those people who are living in the rural areas, they are poor people and they are subsistence farmers. They cannot afford to pay. Some of them might, but most of those people cannot afford to pay for this 3G, 4G, connectivity. That's why open spectrum has to be available there. I mean, these telcos are not going to provide this, the services there for free or as cheap as possible, because they have to pay for the license fee, at the end, and they have to make money out of there. So, open spectrum is especially very, important, to bring this, digital divide, closer, and also to literate the people in the rural areas living digitally. This morning also I heard that the government of India is connecting all these panchayat through the fiber network. The government of Nepal is also doing the same. I mean, it's not connecting all the panchayat, it's connecting at least the district headquarters. There are 75 districts in Nepal, and they are connecting district headquarters with the fiber. But what after that is the main questions. I mean, just connecting the district headquarters or the panchayat to the fiber is not enough. We have to connect, these people living in the villages, with the network, and it has to be, cheaper or affordable for them. So in that case, what is important is, to use this open spectrum as far as it is possible. It will be cheaper for sure, because nobody has to pay a license for this. And also, it is necessary to bring regulations to make people from the rural areas to start a small ISP, rural ISP, in the local area, so that they can provide services for the people living in the rural areas, and also they can make some money for their living. In our case, the government of Nepal has brought a regulation, and that allows people to get, anybody who wants to provide internet service in the rural areas, they can get a license by paying 100 rupees a year, and you can get it within a week. So the regulation like this is also important. Just opening the spectrum is not enough. Thank you.
Just to try and, I can see people want to respond. So but just to capture this. So we've got the suggestion of some form of incentivizing or subsidizing for rural wireless ISP services, open spectrum, unlicensed spectrum, but then also, I think what you were talking about, Mahabir, is also what I was talking about, that in some cases, it's also about licenses. It's not just about open spectrum. But I just wanted to, before we go to Rajneesh, just to be very clear, when we talk about open spectrum, can someone just say, what is the spectrum? What are the frequencies that we would like to be available for unlicensed use? Does somebody want to respond to that?
I think when we talk about 2.4 to 2.486. That's one band. That's right. And then the 5.8. Okay, so which was 5.8 is another one. Yeah, sorry. 5.8 is So 2.4 is already done. 5.8 is already done. That's also available for free here. So you don't need a license in India for 5.8 as well. So additional ones is okay. So that,
going forward, looking at particularly at capacity and bandwidth issues.
Yeah.
Are there other frequencies that we would like to see available for unlicensed use? Rajneesh, do you want to? He's got to have his time anyway.
So if you look at, if you take it from a global view, a lot of countries are moving to digital TV, which means the analog TV channels are pretty much free. Free as in they're not being used anymore. There are also spectrum that is allocated to various other agencies and organizations through the course of history, which are not used in the manner they were initially allocated. So to answer your question on if there are other channels and frequencies, yes, there's quite a few out there. The question is how many of them can we actually feasibly use at the right cost point? Because someone else mentioned earlier that cost is an issue. So we have 700, 900 megahertz, but issue is that we do not have the chipsets which drive the equipment which are being mass produced, like the 2.4 gig chips are and the 5.8 gig and so on chips are, because it's all a matter of cost, right? Now you can have a Wi-Fi chip embedded into your smartphone, into your laptop, your tablet. My TV has one. In fact, my microwave oven has a Wi-Fi chip enabled in it back home. So the thing is, it's that because that chip is very cheap to implement. I think it's about 50 cents at the wholesale level. That's how much they pay for it. So it's not much, okay? Add the additional electronics associated with it, maybe $2 is the cost in total to the customer by putting the chip in. But when we start talking about 700 or 900 or some other frequency where the R&D has not really got us in terms of price points, it won't be that cheap. So there needs to be some sort of mass, critical mass that we need to get to. So that's one. Sorry, do you want to say something?
Just no.
No.
Yeah. Well, I want to just. I kind of want to. You know, I think it's a chicken and egg story. You know, you have the resource, which is available at reasonable costs, and then you have the equipment to harness the resource. I don't think it's one or the other. And speaking about 700 megahertz, I think one of the problems, there is research being done on that. And if you look at UK and if you look at the US, you know, they have just now said that white space research or white space deployments are going to be permissible. So I think that our IITs and our techies are also doing that kind of research to see what is possible, how we might use white space that in that band that's now being released and being reimagined and migrated onto digital platforms. So how might we harness white space for affordable bandwidth connectivity in local areas? So I think, I know that some of the IITs are investigating that, albeit in the lab, and I know that the policy hasn't yet necessarily permitted that kind of rollout. So I feel like we do need to keep advocating at that level also for spectrum, as well as advocate for good prices for equipment and infrastructure costs. So yeah. I'm not convinced that 700 doesn't have the potential to be cheap.
No, I absolutely agree. The potential is there, but it's just getting the critical mass. The reason Wi-Fi is cheap is because there is critical mass. That's what I was trying to say. Now, the other thing is the question of what is open spectrum and what's the value of open spectrum. The reason the Wi-Fi chips are cheap is because no one needs to pay someone a royalty or a license fee to use that spectrum. The same is not true for other spectrum. We have certain spectrum which are auctioned off for billions of dollars. Ultimately, the user has to pay for that. Yes, the telco buys the spectrum, but that cost is passed on. I mean, let's not kid ourselves, right? So if on government one hand wants to say, okay, I want to make $30 billion out of selling the spectrum, fine. What are you going to do with the $30 billion? Okay. How will that impact on the user who wants cheaper access? So there needs to be some balance here and some bigger picture thinking rather than just pure dollars and cents. So I'll end with that.
Do you want to react to that? And then I'll at some point I will tell you about successful white space pilots that we're running in South Africa. But do you want, I saw you nodding to Rashnes. Do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, I find myself in agreement. Just talking about constraints again. An interesting piece, I just had a conversation before walking in here with someone who's in the profession. The price of bandwidth at the gateway in India is 7 times that of Singapore. Okay? So if we had the bandwidth at a 7th of its cost, we would hit other bottlenecks. But if you wanted to remove major obstacles way before you get on your knees in front of the government for the 700 and the 900, and good luck. I'll be the first one to kiss the feet of those who have begged. There's plenty of work otherwise. So for example, lowering the price at the gateway, yeah? And this is just the beginning there. It goes down the feed chain.
Any questions from people in the room? Good. Just